It's July 26th, 2019, and this is day 36 of 366 days of stories. And this is Matt Burns, and I'm here with
Maren Souders.
Maren Souders, and we just met today, but I had heard about you from a mutual friend and reached out to you to see if you'd be willing to participate in this project and to be interviewed. And so thank you for being here. And we were just talking a little earlier, and you were sharing about this interesting picture you've been thinking on lately. And I just wonder if you could share that as an opening today.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot lately about sensitivity and like sensitive people and the role of sensitive people in the world, and particularly at this historic junction where it seems to me that the world, politically, certainly in this country, but other countries as well, there's a lot of, I guess I'd say, insensitivity and a lot of cruelty and harshness and violence, both in terms of physical violence and all kinds of psychological and emotional, verbal violence. And it can be really difficult for those of us who are sensitive. And I've always been very sensitive, and I have tended to surround myself with other sensitive people as well. And I know that so many of us are struggling right now. And what I've been thinking about is, like the importance of sensitivity. And I've been grappling with how we can harness the power of sensitivity, both individually and collectively, to, in some way, it sounds ironic to say overtake something that feels more violent or insensitive, but to me it seems crucial to the survival of our species and certainly the thriving of humanity. And so, my mom told me a story when I was growing up that really kind of stuck with me, although there was a bit of a logical fallacy in it. But it was talking about, it was like a parable between the sun and the wind, and a man standing outside with a jacket. And I guess I think the wind kind of dared the sun, like, hey, let's have a race. Let's see who can get the guy to take off his jacket. And the sun was like, all right. And so the wind gets started and starts blowing and blowing. And the guy is not taking off the jacket, and he's actually like wrapping it tighter around him. And then he's like, I guess, well, all right, I've given it my best shot. Sun, what do you got? And then the sun just kind of, radiates. And before you know it, the guy takes off the jacket. And of course, the logical fallacy is there's temperature in there, and so there's kind of that. But the power of the parable is still really sticks with me, because it's intuitively difficult to understand that somebody less violent or less forceful could bring about a more powerful change in the world. And yet, I believe it's possible, and I think it's crucial. And what I'm wanting to really dedicate my life to is recognizing the importance of that and exploring that, and encouraging people to embrace their sensitivity, because I think we need absolutely every drop of it that we can get to counter the insensitivity that we're seeing.
Can you describe what you mean when you say sensitivity?
Good question.
I could take being or I imagine many could take being sensitive one way or another way.
That's right. That's a good question. People who feel things deeply, people who are maybe easily hurt, easily touched by various kinds of emotion.
Would you also include sensory stimulation and how the world comes in smell or noise or visual would you include is it that kind of sensitive too that you're describing when you mean sensitive?
That's a good question, and I think that probably plays some role, but I'm talking more about emotional sensitivity. And I think there's some overlap of those two, but mostly I'm speaking to emotional sensitivity.
I was curious in meeting you and on this topic, where, if you're familiar with the introvert and the extrovert picture, whether is the tendency more in the introversion side in sensitive people? Is there kind of quietness and an inwardness?
That's a good question too. I don't know if I feel qualified to answer that. I identify personally as an introvert, but pretty close to the line, kind of almost an ambivert. And I haven't given enough thought of that to give an answer that I would be confident with. I do think a lot of introverts are pretty sensitive.
Yeah.
But extroverts maybe as well.
So to go back to your point, then I just wanted to clarify that for my own, making sure I'm having a clear picture. What I'm picking up from you is that you're saying to not underestimate the potential and power of sensitive people to affect dramatic change in the world. Is that?
Yes, and that we need to value it culturally more than we do. It seems like we're in a sort of might makes right kind of cultural mindset these days, and I don't think might makes right. I think it makes a lot of damage. And so I want to see people who have sensitivity and who can hold visions for how they'd like to see the world be in ways that respect other people, other animals, other life forms and ecosystems. And I think another aspect that's really been going through my mind on this is it's so easy for people who are sensitive to be overwhelmed or to be discouraged by people who are either less naturally sensitive or somehow cut off from it, from their own sensitivity, because people can be very contemptuous and derisive and sarcastic. And so something that I've really been paying attention to, like some of my clients lately, my empathy practice, and also just people I see on social media or out and about, a lot of people have a lot of really beautiful visions and hopes for themselves and for the world and for other people. But I find that some people are not very careful about who they share that with or in what context they may share it. And so I find that, like I've noticed a lot of clients have told me that they've been discouraged maybe from a young age, maybe their parents or other family members or close people in their lives didn't really vibe with their dreams of what's possible in the world. And they might have said things like, oh, that's unrealistic, or oh, you're being ridiculous, or something dismissive. And when you get that from a young age, it really seeps in. And it can take a lot to unpack that, but I think it's important for people to unpack it. And I think it's also important for people to just really take care in the present moment whenever we have thoughts and ideas that are very maybe exciting about what's possible in the world. Sometimes if I get an idea like that, I can just be like brimming over with enthusiasm. I just want to share it with anybody. But I've noticed that, there are people who will hear it in exactly the way I want, and it's so affirming, and it builds the energy, and it makes it more possible to manifest that thing. And, I tell somebody about it, they're like, oh, that sounds awesome. I can totally see why that's important. Yeah, let's, and they start brainstorming, and like, then maybe they tell another friend because they're excited about it, and it kind of grows, and it can be a very powerful force. On the other hand, sometimes if we tell somebody who just isn't on that same wavelength, or maybe they've decided that their own dreams are unrealistic, or maybe they've had their own dreams tamped down by other people, they may just make a sarcastic comment or say something like, oh, it doesn't sound realistic, or just something kind of negative, and it can really have a dampening effect. Again, I've noticed it in myself personally that like, maybe I'm really excited about something, but I tell somebody who maybe I think I'm close enough to in whatever context, I think that they're gonna, support me and get on board with it, and they don't, and they're not, or not in the way I was hoping for. And the closer I am to the person, or the more I value and respect their opinion or their intellect, the more damaging that can be to me if they
really make you question yourself.
Yeah, just kind of like, they're right. Yeah, never mind. And then, the idea may be dead. Whereas if I told somebody else or a few other people who were just the right people, that idea is not dead. That idea can really grow and turn into something amazing. And furthermore, it can also, not just that particular idea, but when we're not careful who we share things with, we can start to really just doubt our own selves and the value of our own sensitivity, or the value of our own hopes and dreams. And so I just really want to encourage people to, first of all, let yourself have those dreams. Like if something comes to you and you just think it'd be so cool, like just, even if it's very nebulous at first, or you think of an idea and even if you shoot it down yourself, like, oh, that couldn't be realistic, like still just like, the kernel of it that kind of ignites something inside you, like keep that, and tuck it away, maybe write it down or think about it. And then just, feel for the right times and the right places and the right people to share it with. And in fact, this can even be done. I've hosted circles, like idea sharing circles, heart-centered idea sharing circles, where the whole point is people show up and share their culture shifting ideas, and everybody just supports each other. And that can be really powerful. But even just on a more casual level, talking to friends or talking to people who can be supportive of that kind of thing. God, we're off track.
Well, be careful who you share with.
Be careful who you share with,
who you share your dreams with. And on the positive side of that, you can find people who will believe in you and that you can feel secure in sharing with them without them casting down your dreams.
Yeah.
I wonder, when it sounds to me as I'm listening to you like you're speaking as a sensitive person to other sensitive people. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that for people who identify that way, that would reach listening ears, because they would hear in you somebody who understands in a certain way their experiences that, say, insensitive people don't understand. And I'm also hearing you in a way as an educator to people who don't identify as sensitive, perhaps, that of what the sensitive experience is, so that there could be a better understanding. But would you say that you're kind of, in your circles, do you draw one more from this crowd of sensitive people towards your work?
I would say so, yeah. I think I was lucky to not have a whole lot of naysaying in my early childhood about my thoughts. And so I think that enabled me to build kind of a basis of like kind of self-respect around it, or like a, belief that, what I think of could be valuable, it could be helpful to the world. It's worthwhile, it's a smart idea. And I feel a real sense of compassion, both personally and when I think about it on a larger scale, when I listen to people whose stories are different, where they got a lot of naysaying and negativity from early on, and it just really, it makes it very difficult for them to get by in the world and to...
it's really ingrained.
It's ingrained, and it can be hard. And I find that later, like I've had clients come to me and they start telling me kind of tentatively about, well, I thought about this, I kind of had this idea. I'm like, that sounds like an amazing idea. Oh yeah, well, and then they kind of, perk up and they start telling more. And then usually I start co-brainstorming, because I just love supporting people and their ideas. And I'm like, oh yeah, what about this? Do you know this person? And kind of just get things going. By the end, they're like, this is amazing, and like, but I find that if I see those people consistently, it's still often a consistent pattern where like, they just tend to doubt themselves. And so I just really want to do what I can to encourage people to unpack whatever messages they've heard that may be dismissive, and just really like dare to dream and dare to share it. Just be careful, who you share it with.
You mentioned your empathy practice. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I work with people one-on-one, usually on the phone, because it's all around the world, but sometimes locally in person. And this is what I do. I just hold space for people to share, to share anything, to share if they're struggling, because a lot of times people are struggling with so many different things. And so then I just kind of hold space for, I just listen and offer compassion and empathy for whatever they're going through. And then often I find maybe toward the second half of the hour, once people have kind of emptied out, it's like Marshall Rosenberg with Nonviolent Communication had a great metaphor with a bowl of marbles, and there's no input. Once the marbles are full, you can't keep pouring more marbles in, they'll just fall off the top. But if you empty them all out, then there's room for something new. And I find that, when people kind of can talk to somebody who's very willing to just be present and not dismiss any feelings that they may have, and really instead just empathize, they kind of empty that out. And then they do have more of a mind. It's not necessarily my intention in any given session, but usually maybe the first half is people kind of emptying out whatever difficulties they're going through. And then when they kind of relax and they feel a sense of trust and they feel just a sense of lightness and openness, then a lot of times they will start talking about dreams they have and projects that they want to do, or something that they've always kind of thought about. And I love hearing people talk about that stuff too.
Yeah, so you're giving them your interest and your attention and listening to them and empathizing with their experience. And what do you notice that they get from it, and how would you describe what you get from that?
I notice what they get from it is just a lot of it. I can see it physically if we're in person, but even on the phone, I just feel like a sense of lightness in the way they're talking. They just, sometimes they may take a deep breath, or just kind of like, oh, I feel so much better now. God, I was so stressed out. This is really helping me feel like I can move forward. Often they have some inspiration to take action on something that they've had a little tickle in the back of their head about. And then what I get from it, it's just so rewarding. I mean, I love seeing people do that. I want everybody in the world to be operating at peak capacity, to be like just really connected to their heart and really connected to their dreams and their spirit and what's possible in the world, and like joy and moving toward it. I had a vision one time when I was seeing a therapist, and I couldn't really describe the vision, and I probably can't now either, but I'll actually give it a shot. Like I had this, somehow just came to me, like this picture of the earth with people all around it, like pins in a pin cushion, but they weren't stuck into it, but they were just like all on the surface of the earth, and they almost looked like little dolls, all different bright colors and stuff. And somehow it's like they all just started vibrating together, like they because they were each connected to their highest potential and possibility and joy. And so that it's like the entire earth was just kind of vibrating with these colors and just, the best that it possibly could be.
Sounds like a peaceful image to experience.
Yeah, peaceful, but also just like vibrant and like inspiring.
Yeah. And today you had shared with me about this blog you made a few years ago of an empathy tour. Mm-hmm. Can you share something a little bit about what that experience was for you? Yeah,
a while ago I decided to offer just on the street empathy with a sign. Just said, need to talk, free empathy. And I went down to the Central Library here in Portland and just sat there and just waited for people to come up, and they did, and people had a variety of different things to share. Sometimes people did have something really heavy on their mind that they wanted to talk about. Other times they were just like, oh, empathy. Yeah, I want to talk about that. And so we would kind of have a meta conversation about the concept of empathy, which also I found rewarding. And then while I was there, I thought, I want to make this bigger. Like, I don't want to do it even just in Portland. I want to go someplace else. And I've been wanting to visit some family on the East Coast, and I love taking trains and like all this stuff. It was kind of like what I'm talking about. Like, I was doing what I wanted to do, and I was following my dreams, just a little inkling of it. And then it turned into this bigger thing because I just kept dreaming bigger. And so I ended up taking a tour where I went to Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., and Raleigh, North Carolina. I flew to Boston and I flew back from Raleigh, but I took the train between all those, and I visited friends and family, and then I just went out on the street in these different places and just listened to people, and I got a wide variety of people talking about things.
How was it for you in stretching to put yourself out there in that way?
In some ways, it just really felt great. It felt like I was doing what I'm here on the earth to do. So that was really cool. But I mean, it was a stretch. I mean, I was nervous, especially going to like Boston and New York. I had heard all these stereotypes about the Northeast and these cities, and people are going to be mean. And I think I did hear some people kind of laughing at me in Boston now that I think about it. And that was my very first day. And so I was a little like nervous, but I thought, well, here I am doing the thing I'm doing, and they didn't actually say anything to me. And
kind of entering putting yourself in a potentially vulnerable situation.
Potentially vulnerable, yeah. And you probably read probably the most poignant day was in Boston at Harvard Square. There was a guy who really took issue with the fact that I was offering empathy because he had a fear that people were going to just suddenly decide to spill their guts to me, a stranger on the street, and they were going to bring up things that were too vulnerable for them. They weren't going to have good boundaries for themselves. They were going to share things that were too vulnerable, and it was going to cause them to maybe have a psychotic break and actually maybe commit suicide. I mean, the guy was really concerned about it, and we went back and forth quite a bit. I mean, I hadn't considered that point of view. And
that was another person holding a different sign?
Yes, he was holding it was a panhandling sign, but it was, what it actually said was seeking human kindness. And so I had initially seen him, and I thought, this is perfect. We should work together. We're obviously on the same team here. And so I was so surprised when he came up to me and just really had a lot of fear and a lot of concern and a lot of kind of judgment and shaming of me for doing something that he considered to be very dangerous.
Mm. And what were you finding? What was your your gut response? Were you being a bit put off by him?
I was a bit put off. I mean, I was kind of like, it's funny. I mean, that's what we're talking about. I was like, stop being such a naysayer. Come on, And basically, he was exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. Like, be careful who you share this with, because this was important to me, and it felt vulnerable, and it felt like something positive for the world. And yet here was somebody who had found a way to turn it into something negative. Mm-hmm. So you can't always protect yourself from people who are going to have negative things to say. That's actually, thank you for bringing that up. But I also had a lot of empathy for him. It sounded like he had a lot of pain in his life. He said something at one point like, "Oh, I've seen things you wouldn't even, you couldn't handle it. You couldn't handle it." I couldn't handle hearing him say the things that he had seen. So clearly he had gone through a lot. And he even told me that he had a friend who had gone to see a therapist, and the therapist somehow said the wrong thing, and he took it the wrong way, and the guy did end up committing suicide. And so this guy had some justification for his fears. And I mean, it gave me pause a bit.
Yeah. You get to a place of understanding and empathy, and you had that other part of yourself in the moment.
Yeah.
That was a bit kind of affronted.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some of each.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if in wrapping up our conversation, whether you can encapsulate sensitivity, empathy, philosophy on life. How would you present that?
I just think we need more people who are connected to their hearts and connected to their dreams, and who are willing to be vulnerable. And so I really want to encourage people to do that. And a necessary infrastructural component of that is that people need to have good boundaries too, and be careful protecting that vulnerable stuff, and just to hold it dear, and to not let other people's negativity diminish it, and also to just to share it with people who are more likely to help it bloom.
All right. And how can people find you and your work?
I have two websites, happytolisten.com and dreamintochange.com.
Dreamintochange.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Happy to listen. And you are?
My name? Maren Souders. I also have MarenSouders.com that I'm working on. It's under construction.
I wanted to make sure I didn't mispronounce it. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Maren. Maren Souders.
Thanks.